Let's take a look at the
Is there soccer?
at the playoff picture.
I don't know what that
I'm not getting into that debate. I'm not getting into that debate. In terms of the AFC playoff picture, the Bills right now sitting as the 1 seed. Then you have the Chiefs, Ravens, and Titans as the other division leaders. And then you have the wild card spots. Bengals, Dolphins. I mean, how costly was that loss to the 49ers? Pushed them all the way down to 6th. And then you have the Jets and those teams on the outside looking in. Patriots, Chargers, and what about the Raiders? In terms of the NFC, you have the Eagles on top at 11-1, and then you have the Vikings at 10-2, Niners, Bucks rounding out the top 4, Commanders, Lions, Packers still in the hunt. Between the two conferences, there are 3 5-win teams that could still make the playoffs. All right, so let's get into these playoff pictures, and we'll start with the Bucks, who all but eliminated the Saints from postseason contention with that comeback win last night. We've learned to never count Tom Brady out, Pete, but against better teams, the way they're currently getting things done is just not going to work.
Well, we'll find out this week. They play the 49ers. The 49ers have a darn good defense. I mean, they can get after it. And the thing about Tom Brady, they got a gift last night. I mean, the Saints gave them that game. All you have to do is get Mark Ingram gets a first down, probably win the game. They catch a couple passes in the middle of the field. Taysom Hill had one knocked away. They win the game. And then, oh, by the way, they went to their prevent 4-cross defense, which was a disaster. Why do you do that? You had stopped them the entire game playing the way you did. They botched it, and they deserved to lose, but give Tom Brady credit because when he had to make the plays, he made the plays.
Yeah, there's no question about it, and they gave them opportunities. And Pete, tell me what you thought. I thought when Troy Aikman pointed out when they punted with about 7:14 to go and didn't go for it on 4th down, I thought that might be it. And he was, and I think rightfully so, kind of having an arched eyebrow is, you're really going to give the ball away here the way you've been going on offense? You don't have many opportunities. Todd Bowles totally off the hook on that one. And because they ended up winning the ball game, and Tom Brady answered it perfectly after the game when they asked him about it. He said, Coach obviously made the right decision. Boom, you win, you walk away. But Jeremy used the word sustainable. It's not sustainable playing this way. And in San Francisco, if they play the same game they played against New Orleans, they'll get beat by 2 touchdowns minimum. I mean, that's just not going to happen. And I know Brock Purdy is going to be the quarterback, and we'll get into more of that later, I'm sure. But that defense in San Francisco, that's not going to happen, all right? Even with Tom Brady, they're not going to give up that type of a lead down the stretch. So they cannot afford to come out of the gate, have one good drive, kick a field goal, and then go into a midwinter sleep. It just can't happen.
The offensive line is terrible for Tampa Bay right now. I mean, you have a backup right tackle. You have backups across the board. The left tackle has more holding penalties.
You have one guy.
Yeah, and the left tackle has more holding penalties. He's the one guy. He has more holding penalties in the last 7 years than anybody in the league.
He had the holding penalty on the first touchdown that put them in the lead. Remember, that got called back.
Yeah,
and then
he had 2 of them last night. Two big ones. And you play that 49ers defense and you get like that, you have major problems. So I think the Bucs are in trouble. They play the 49ers, then the Bengals. So that's a tough little stretch there.
Tough 2 games coming up for the Bucs. We're going to find out exactly who they are, to your point, Pete. The Eagles continue to be the class of the NFC and the NFL. They could have clinched last week, but results didn't go their way in order to do that. Despite that, though, Charles, this team just continues to operate at a different level.
Yeah, they certainly do. And I caught them against Indianapolis on the road in a game they probably should have lost, but they found a way to win it. And it's that type of a year for them, not in terms of good fortune, but they've learned how to battle. They understand that sometimes you're going to be in the mud and have to slog it out. And it may not be totally pretty, but if you walk away with a win, no one else cares, right? That's the bottom line. And that Indianapolis win may go a long way for them, maybe even farther than some of the wins where they jump on teams, because they find out things about themselves. They find out they can grit things out. They find out that Jalen Hurts down the stretch can attach a team to the number one on his back and carry them to the finish line, because he totally did that in Indianapolis. Absolutely. So it's going to be fun to watch them continue. It's a very interesting schedule, though, having coming up, Pete. They're at the Giants, at Chicago, at Dallas in a very unusual 3 in a row late in the season on the road. But they've built up a pretty good cushion for themselves in the division. I don't think we're worried about their chances of getting there in the playoffs and all, but it's a very interesting 3-game stretch coming up.
Yeah, but we saw something on Sunday that we hadn't seen in a long time from the Eagles. A flaw that could have been their undoing seems to be fixed a little bit. They stopped the run. I mean, they had Derrick Henry bottled up. Now, it's 2 weeks in a row. Derrick Henry's been bottled up because his offensive line isn't very good. But that's a good sign for the Eagles going forward. We know they're going to score points, but they stopped the run.
Yeah, and Pete, let's just go back then, because we got the news today, obviously, that Tennessee fired John Robinson as their general manager, and the full story will come out as we go. As I'm best understanding it, this is about personnel decisions, and maybe A.J. Brown was the final straw on Sunday. I don't know. We'll find out as we go. But when you look at this, talk about general managers, Howie Roseman with a team that was cruising. But as you pointed out, the run defense had become leaky. So he goes, okay, we're trying to win this whole thing. Linval Joseph, you're free. Let's go. And Ndamukong Suh, you're free. Let's go. And then when they get Jordan Davis back, wow. I think that's just a general manager being proactive, a general manager understanding that this team has a chance to win it all now, and a general manager who has the capital to go get it done doing so. If you're a football team, a head football coach like Nick Sirianni, how can you not look at your GM and just say, we will do our level best because you've given us every opportunity to win this thing?
And there's a lot of good players on that team as they look to make that playoff push, lock up their place hopefully this week. All right, the Minnesota Vikings go to Detroit this week. Earlier this season, I mean, this looked like a slam dunk W. Now that's not necessarily the case. Detroit's actually playing some good football. Pete, who's this game more important for at this point?
Detroit. There's no question about it. They're still alive. I mean, they can make a run here. And they score points. They're really good on offense. I want to give credit, A, to the Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator, but B, Jared Goff. You know, when he was traded, it was like they just dumped him. Oh, we'll get Matt Stafford. Matt Stafford's so much better. And maybe he is better, but Jared Goff's been really good this year, and he's got that offense moving up and down the field. They did not punt against Jacksonville last week. Now, Jacksonville's terrible on defense. I get it. But that offense is interesting, and the Vikings aren't exactly great on defense either. This could be a track meet up and down the field, and I think the Lions are definitely in the mix right now, Jeremy, to be a playoff team if they can keep this thing up.
Charles, when you look at the Vikings at this point, who are they for you?
The Vikings are a team that Kevin O'Connell, their brand new head coach, is telling every single day the numbers don't matter. Okay, we know that they're explosive on offense. Look, they haven't run it as well as they used to with Dalvin Cook, and sometimes I think they need to run it more with him. I saw that on Sunday. But you know they can make those plays on the perimeter with Jefferson. KJ Osborne makes timely catches. Hawkinson, ironically enough, leaves Detroit, goes to Minnesota. He'll see his old teammates this week. It's the defensive side of the ball that's the most interesting to me, guys, because Ed Donatel, their defensive coordinator, consistently preaches yards don't matter, points do. Meaning, how many points do we give up? And they won the game Sunday off of that philosophy. 2 takeaways, and they're very good at taking the ball away. They're decent in the red zone, but on Sunday against the Jets, they took it to the next level. The Jets had 4 straight drives in the second half, all culminated in field goals. And Pete, as you well know, if you kick a lot of field goals, you usually do what? You usually get beat. And in the last 2 series of the ball game, they had a stop on 4th down in the end zone with Berrios with a near catch. And then they get an interception at the goal line to finish things off. To me, Jeremy and Pete, this team is a lot grittier than we ever would have thought. I don't know that it's the type of team you want to be, but it's the type of team that finds a way and has a knack of making plays they need to make when they absolutely have to have them. Because the numbers sure tell you something different on defense.
And here's the other thing about that on both lines, you want to be good on both lines. You want to be dominant on both lines. They are not. And without Darisaw at left tackle, they're really average. And when you look at their defensive line, they haven't been getting home like I thought they would get home, particularly Daniil Hunter and that crew. I thought they'd be better rushing the passer. So they have to be better, A, against the run on defense, but also rushing the passer, and their offensive line has major issues when Darisaw's not in the game.
He's going to let Charles get away with the pun. He's called the Vikings grittier. The gritty? Grittier. Oh. Charles, well done.
Well, he didn't call him a fraud like I called him a couple weeks ago.
There's that, too.
And by the way, Pete, I was just there for the Jets-Vikings game. No one referenced you by name, but in multiple meetings, I heard the word fraud. And I went, is anyone going to actually say Pete Prisco? No one did, but the word fraud was brought up. Multiple people.
So I'm glad I can help and motivate
those
the team.
Viking horns.
Yeah.
There are ears that go with those Viking horns, apparently. They're not just blowing the Gallo horn. They're actually listening. And Pete Prisco's words are resonating.
Well, and just to show you, too, the fact that maybe Vegas doesn't really know who the Vikings are, the Lions 1.5-point favorites, which is a credit to how they're playing right now. Of course, that line could move as we move through the week.
Hey, guys, real quick before you go, just remember this. 1-score games, right? 8 points or less. They are 9-0 this year.
Yeah.
One thing to keep in mind.
49ers, Charles, you mentioned them earlier, 8-4. Down to the now Mr. Relevant at quarterback, as it turns out, in Brock Purdy. Do we even know what the Niners' playoff chances are at this point if they ride with Purdy, Charles, or is this kind of a wait and see?
No, I think we already know. I think that we know that this is a playoff team with Purdy. And the reason I say that is how their offense is constructed. And we use a term all the time, and sometimes I wonder if we just overuse it. Pete, you help me out, okay? Hit me with the shovel if you need to, all right? This offense is quarterback friendly. How many times have we heard teams describe that for, hey, our offense is quarterback friendly? Well, I think the 49ers is extremely quarterback friendly. Why? George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, a big-time offensive line. They've got, Brandon Ayuk, who's really starting to come into his own. They have targets, they have people, and they have the creativity and play calling of Kyle Shanahan, who schemes a lot of people open. Like, Pete, I'll be honest. Kyle Shanahan, I would bet my last dollar, could scheme you or me open once a game. Guaranteed. That's how good he is at play calling and designing. I think Brock Purdy fits in there well. He has the athleticism to run their boot and waggle game. He can get to the perimeter a little bit throwing the football. He doesn't have to be a hero for the most part. We shall see how it goes, but I think that they're already a playoff team with him. The key is going to be how much better does he continue to get between now and playoff time, because I don't think there's going to be another quarterback that comes in. The Baker Mayfield thing, it's not going to be Josh Johnson taking his job. He's their guy, and let's see how this thing plays out.
I think it's perfect situation for him. And by the way, he has a cocky, arrogant swagger about him when he's on the field. Yeah. And I love seeing that. They will not drop off a great deal with him in the lineup. I'm going to guarantee you that. The kid's going to be a good football player. He's a good quarterback. And he didn't go to Arizona State out of Scottsdale. That kind of upset me a little bit, but that's a whole other issue.
Now from Iowa State, and Purdy's going to try to do what no other first-time starter has done versus Tom Brady, and that's win. The previous 6 are 0-6. Pete Prisco, Charles Davis discussing the evolving playoff picture in the NFC as we head into Week 14. As you take a look at those NFC odds, of course, it is the Eagles on top plus 190. Then you have the Cowboys, 49ers, and Vikings rounding things out. 49ers opponent this week, the Buccaneers, 9-1. Right, that's the NFC playoff picture. What about the AFC? Things are a lot murkier over there, certainly in terms of the battle at the top. We'll get into that with Pete and Charles next on HQ. Welcome back to CBS Sports HQ. Walking through the AFC playoff picture. It is the Bills on top because of a tiebreak over the Chiefs. Chiefs sitting there at the same record at 9-3. Then you have the Ravens and the Titans, Patriots, Chargers, and Raiders. Still in the hunt there. You can count the Browns and Steelers if you want, but it's mainly Patriots, Chargers, and the Raiders.
By the way, I love that. A tiebreak. They beat them. The old good old-fashioned tiebreaker.
Yeah, good old-fashioned tiebreak. Let's work through what's possible and what's probable with Pete Prisco and Charles Davis. That battle for the 1 seed involves 5 teams at this point, separated by 1 win. Given the tiebreak scenarios, it's Buffalo's spot to lose at this point, isn't it, Charles?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And the beauty for Buffalo is within their own division, they've got some games to play, both revenge games, quote unquote, right? They lost at Miami in tropical conditions earlier this year. They lost at the Jets. Also, was tropical conditions because we were in November. It was 76 degrees. So it was a little weird that day. But both of them have to come to Buffalo. So for the Buffalo Bills within division, they get their chief rivals coming to them. And by the way, New England, guess what? They come to them as well. And right now, they haven't punted against New England the last 3 times out. So I think that they like where they are right now because home field, hopefully they feel like they're getting themselves a little bit fresher after that 3-game stretch with, 2 in Detroit and then they had to go to New England. Let's see how it plays out. But I certainly like their chances. And let's face it, guys, that Bengals game is this Sunday or Monday night, I believe. That's going to be wild. You guys, I mean, we all know that because there will be some implications in that ball game for both teams. So we'll have a playoff atmosphere connected with it.
Yeah, Burrow versus Allen. Give me more of that. I love that. Look, when you look at the two schedules, the Chiefs' schedule is much more favorable. I mean, you definitely look at it from that standpoint. They have the Bengals. They have the Bills have the Bengals, the Dolphins. Those are good football teams. And you throw in the Jets in there, who they lost to. You look at the other side. There's nothing there. I mean, at the Raiders is a tough game, maybe, but since they've been playing better. So I think the schedule favors the Chiefs. But when you look at it, I think this Bills team is just now getting it going at the right time. That's what I absolutely believe. I think they're getting it going at the right time.
They had their hiccup.
Yeah, and now here they go. Off they go. Josh Allen's back. The elbow seems like it's better. This team is ready to go. They're the best team in the NFL. And if they get home field advantage in the postseason, it's going to be tough to beat them at Buffalo.
Philadelphia Eagles would like a word.
Well, if you had to play, look, I have the Eagles won. They've earned the right to be there. But if you had to pin me down, and they had to play each other, I'd pick the Buffalo Bills.
All right. Well, Ravens are on top of the AFC North by virtue of a tie break, Pete. Not the hardest of schedules to finish the season. Do you think they can hold off the Bengals?
I don't. I think the Bengals are another team that's certain. Now, the Bengals' schedule is tough, so that's going to be a problem. But Joe Burrow is back to being Joe Burrow. I mean, he's actually put his name into the MVP conversation. And then you go on the other side, and you have a team with quarterback issues. Lamar Jackson wasn't playing well in the two games in quarter plus when he went out because he only had one touchdown pass. Their passing game is awful right now, and that's a problem. And now he's not going to be around for a while. So Huntley takes over. He's did some good things the other day, but it took him a while to get going. I'd much rather have the Bengals situation because I love their passing game. Their offensive line's playing better, and their defense is really starting to step it up a little bit as well. So I think the Bengals are a much better team. It's going to be tough, to get this thing going because they have that brutal schedule, but I think they're the better football team.
Yeah, in a two-shovel segment, I agree with Pete. I just think they're a better football team right now and playing better football as we go along, and they're a little bit more intact. When you don't have the full health of your quarterback, and the worst injury that could happen to Lamar Jackson is one to his legs, because that propels them, and he doesn't get the same help this year from their running game. The rest of the guys, in order to help spring him, he has to become even more of a part of their running game. So I'm totally with Pete on this one. The Bengals right now, to me, are playing better ball in that division, and I don't care who they play down the stretch. I just like where they are right now.
And you talk about the Bills hitting their stride. Bengals, another team that appear to be hitting their stride late in the season. Big game this week for the playoff push is in L.A. Justin Herbert and the Chargers welcome Tua and the Dolphins. Draft classmates, Tua and Herbert, going head-to-head. Costly loss last week in San Francisco for the Dolphins. We talked about that. Really, I mean, they can't afford any further setbacks, can they, Charles?
No, they absolutely cannot. And before the season began, tell me if I'm wrong, Pete, this game would have been billed as, see, Dolphins, you should have taken Herbert. That's how this game would have been billed prior to the season. Now what's interesting about it is, can Herbert rally his team enough to get to the playoffs while Tua looks like he's almost locked into getting there and has had a heck of a year? It's amazing how much times change in a very short amount of time, but give them both credit. Both tremendous young quarterbacks, and this is the type of game, as you would say, Pete, sign me up for this. Give me more of that. Tua versus Herbert. Yeah, I wish they could meet more than once every so often.
I was wrong about Tua. I've admitted that many a time. He's been much better than I thought he would be. But Herbert is the better quarterback in my mind. If I had my choice, I would take Justin Herbert. The problem with Herbert is he's coached by an offensive staff that doesn't allow him to be who he is. Could you imagine Justin Herbert in Miami's offense with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and Mike McDaniel calling the plays? My God, it would be scary. So this is a good matchup. Tua came off a terrible game last week. He was awful last week. Wild, high, threw a lot of passes short. It just wasn't a good look for him. And I know he didn't have his starting tackles, but he did not look comfortable. Credit to Tua, because after the game, he stood up there and said, it's on me, and I want to hear that from my quarterback. So I give him props for that. This is a proving ground game of sorts for him because everybody was on Herbert before. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But the Chargers, they kind of put the handcuffs on their quarterback, and I blame the staff for that.
Well, I will say this. Your point about him having a rough game last week, standing up, meeting the media and all, this is what you learn as a young quarterback. How do you bounce back? How do you rally your team when you've had a tough game? I've said it a million times when I've talked about this. I evaluate quarterbacks based on their worst days, not their best days. Their best days, you get at home and they can be that person. But I want to know how you're going to handle it when you're down 7 late, down 6 late, 1 drive left. And by the way, you're 21 for 50 on the ball game. You're 17 for 39 on the ball game, and you've thrown 2 picks. That's when I find out who you are. This is Tua's essentially. This is a time for Tua. Is he going to bounce back off of this one? Is the offense going to bounce back? And Justin Herbert, he's trying to rally his team and get to a playoffs that they should have made last year, blew it down the stretch. Can they find a way to rally and get it done this year? And again, not much help from the defense because Pete and I could get yards running the ball right now.
Squeaky bum time in the NFC and the AFC. Discussing that with Charles Davis and Pete Prisco. Charles, good to see you as always. Pete, thanks for hopping on. Good to see you too. Now, for more from the NFL, including in-depth highlights and analysis, be sure to check out the latest edition of Inside the NFL. James Brown and his crew of present and future Hall of Famers giving you insight and analysis only those who played the game can give. New episodes Inside the NFL every Tuesday on Paramount+.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.